Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob Lowe, and I'm the Regional Administrator for the FAA's Southwest Region, which includes New Mexico. I'm here with my colleague, Stephen Bond, the Acting Air Traffic Manager for the FAA's Albuquerque Air Traffic Control Tower, and Tamara Bell, one of our supervisory frontline managers for the FAA's Albuquerque Flight Standards District Office. We're here today to answer your questions about the FAA's Letter of Agreement, or LOA, concerning hot air balloon operations. We recognize the importance of hot air balloon operations, especially in the Albuquerque area. I have a personal connection to your operations and the Albuquerque area. I was born and raised in Albuquerque. I learned to fly there. I know the airspace. I was an air traffic controller there early in my career, and I have ridden and crewed for hot air balloons. In fact, my parents took me to the first balloon event in Albuquerque that became the International Balloon Fiesta in the parking lot of what was then the brand new Coronado Mall with just 13 balloons. You could say green chili is in my DNA, and it certainly is. I understand your concerns, and our team here at FAA has been working very hard to find a path forward. Last week, the FAA announced that hot air balloons will not have to add tracking equipment to fly in the Albuquerque airspace during the next year if they agree to certain procedures. This enables balloon pilots to continue flying safely in the region while we work on long-term solution. This letter of agreement is being put in place to ensure safe operations in Albuquerque, though it does have implications for operations in other parts of the country, such as Colorado. We want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask your questions and get answers today. This broadcast is being shown on the FAA social media feeds, including YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. On each of these platforms, you will find a Google form where you can enter your questions. Please do so now so we can answer them for you. Please also note that this presentation will be recorded and will be available on these platforms after today's session is completed. Please do limit your questions to the letter of agreement so we can be sure to address your concerns. But before we open it up to your questions, we want to provide you some information about the LOA and how it will affect operations in the Albuquerque area. We also know many of you have questions about the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or ADSB, and the ADSB out mandate. It was created through a decade-long rulemaking process that began in 2010 with a mandatory compliance date of January 1st, 2020. The FAA realizes that some of the language used in previous outreach materials was not clear, and we understand the confusion about applicability to hot air balloons in certain airspace classifications. Now, because of that, the FAA is conducting a safety risk management panel. We will conduct a risk analysis of balloon operations in Class B or Bravo and Class C or Charlie airspace following implementation of the mandate. We plan to include stakeholders from the balloon community in this process. After the panel review has conducted their work, the FAA will determine next steps. We also share a non-negotiable commitment to safety. We look forward to working with you as we go through this process. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Stephen Bond, the Acting Air Traffic Manager of the FAA Albuquerque Air Traffic Control Tower, who will start us off with an overview of the letter of agreement. Stephen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Stephen Bond, the Acting Air Traffic Manager of Albuquerque Tower. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome the ballooning community. Albuquerque Air Traffic understands the unique identity and cultural heritage that hot air ballooning brings to the city of Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico. Albuquerque Air Traffic realizes its importance and wants hot air ballooning to continue in a safe and situationally aware environment. The next few slides will highlight the letter of agreement, which is an interim solution while a more permanent one is discussed and developed at a national level. Next slide, please. This slide shows a list of issued deviations contained within the letter of agreement from CFR Part 91. These are 91.130 operations in Class C airspace, both for communications and equipment requirements. The next one is 91.215, air traffic control transponder and altitude reporting equipment use. And then finally, CFR 91.225, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, ADSB out equipment and use. Next slide. To be a signatory party to the LOA, the following information is required. We will require each operator's name and airman certificate number, each balloon's registration number, and for balloon societies and associations, the names of its members who have requested in writing to operate under this LOA, and written attestation from each operator of knowledgeability and adherence to the LOA. We have an email listed below there. While it's quite lengthy, if you contact us, we will make sure to get that email out to you. As a side note, this LOA does not apply to fiestas or other organized balloon events. Those events, such as the balloon fiesta, would be handled in accordance with usual procedures through flight standards. Next slide, please. In the LOA, we require telephone notification from signatory parties, but only if you're going to operate as a group of 10 or more balloons. So if you're anywhere between 1 and 9 balloons, we do not require a pre-notification telephone call, only if your group contains 10 or more hot air balloons operating at the same time. For that, there is a telephone number listed in the LOA, which will require a phone call on. Next slide, please. Unless an urgent distress or emergency condition exists, Albuquerque Air Traffic Control will not approve any real-time deviation or waiver requests on frequency. This is to allow us to do some risk management of balloon operations. Next slide, please. This is an overview of Albuquerque's Class C airspace. The surface area is a 5 nautical mile radius around the Sunport, surface to 9,400 mean sea level. The secondary tier is from 5 to 10 nautical miles from the Sunport, 6,900 to 9,400, with the exception of the east side cut out there in red, which is 7,800 to 9,400 MSL. As a note, this LOA only provides relief to the Albuquerque Class Charlie airspace. The Double Eagle Class Delta airspace must be.
Probably are going to get an email giving you full editor access.
LOA. Next slide, please. Monitoring requirements. We're requiring balloon operators to monitor the Albuquerque Air Traffic Control Tower 120.3 and be prepared to respond to communication, with the exception of an area north of Interstate 40 and west of Interstate 25. Also, we will require balloon operators to notify the Air Traffic Control Tower immediately of any distress, emergency, or LOA non-compliance issue. Next slide, please. When we built this proposal, we tried to use visual reference points with the big I, or the intersection of Interstate 25 and Interstate 40 being one of our primary reference points. So in this slide, and this only pertains to the monitoring of frequency 120.3 or the control tower's frequency, we do not require any monitoring north of Interstate 40 and west of Interstate 25. For the other quadrants of the airspace, we do require monitoring on 120.3. Next slide, please. In addition, we have communication requirements. So within 5 nautical miles of the Sunport, or within that inner tier of the Class Charlie airspace, we do expect two-way radio communications to be established on 120.3, and that's simply a establishment with your call sign and your location. Next slide, please. So this is our deviation map. So we examined the Class C airspace in its entirety. We stuck to prominent visual landmarks and roadways for reference. For the outer ring, and if we start at the northeast corner or north of Interstate 40 and east of Interstate 25, signatory parties are authorized a deviation to operate in that airspace at or below 8,500 MSL. This is to protect for runway 3 and runway 8 departures, as well as runway 21 and runway 26 arrivals. As we move clockwise to the Fort Hills vicinity, while historically there has not been a whole lot of balloon operations in that area, we built an area of deviation at or below 8,500 MSL to protect for aircraft in the critical arrival and departure phase of flight for runway 8 and runway 26. Clockwise from there to an area south of Interstate 40 and west of Interstate 25, signatory parties are authorized deviation to operate at or below 8,500 MSL with 2 exceptions. Next slide, please. No deviation is authorized east of the Rio Grande River between Bridge Boulevard or Avenida Dolores Huerta and Rio Bravo Boulevard. This area contains a large concentration of arrival and departure traffic in a critical phase of flight in reference to runway 826. However, it's understood that downtown is a popular balloon operation via the Rio Grande. So we allowed a 6,000 and below deviation operation area over the river west to approximately Isleta Boulevard between Bridge Boulevard, Avenida Dolores Huerta, and Rio Bravo Boulevard. Next slide, please. There is no deviation overhead the Albuquerque International Sunport from Central Street south to the Tijeras Arroyo. Should balloons find themselves in this area, they should expect communication and instructions from the air traffic control tower. Next slide, please. And as I indicated earlier, if unavoidable circumstances require balloonists to fly over the Albuquerque International Sunport, balloons shall climb to 8,000 and cross over the airport area. Descent below 8,000 may begin when the balloon crosses the Tijeras Arroyo south of the airfield. The reason for that is if you're coming over the top of the airport, we want you a little bit higher so that we can take our traffic beneath you. Next slide, please. In reference to Kirtland Air Force Base, in the event balloons fly south over Kirtland Air Force Base, pilots shall comply with the following. Avoid landing on the Kirtland Air Force Base property except in emergency situations or for safety of flight reasons. If landing at Kirtland is the only alternative, land as soon as it is safe. Remain with the balloon until base officials arrive with the chase crew and remain with the official Kirtland escort until departure from the base. For further information, please contact the Kirtland Air Force Base. Next slide, please. And just as a couple of FYIs, a couple of points of note. The radar room and the tower cab are not co-located. The radar room is downstairs. The tower cab obviously is upstairs in the tower. Radar cannot see balloons. The profile is not large enough to provide a radar return unless they're in a rather significant group of hot air balloons. So you can see in this slide on the left, the circle is kind of the area that we're looking at. There's no radar return for the picture on the right. Next slide, please. In this example, and this is a picture taken from last year's balloon fiesta, looking to the north, the conglomerate of balloons there shows up on our radar scope as weather or precipitation returns. In either instance, the radar room or the radar controller is unable to separate balloons from either the precipitation area or from the unseen radar. Next slide, please. That's it for me. At this time, I am going to turn it back over to Mr. Lowe for any questions.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And if you'll stay on with us, we'll invite Tamara Bell to join us as well. Tamara, good afternoon. Introduced Tamara earlier. She's part of our Flight Standards District Office, the FSDO team. And Stephen's going to turn his camera back on here in just a second. We've already got questions coming in, which is a great thing. So let's make our way through those questions, if you all don't mind. Let me read those, and if you all will help me answer those. Stephen, the first one looks like it'll go to you. It says, "What is the purpose of a letter of agreement?"
The purpose of the letter of agreement is it contains deviations which allow balloon pilots who are parties to the agreement to operate in Class Charlie airspace without ADS-B out or transponder equipment.
Okay, great. And one more follow-on question to that, Stephen. We've got a participant that's asking, how long will the letter of agreement last?
The letters of agreement will be in effect until March 31st of 2023, while a more permanent solution is discussed and developed at the national level.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit in the introduction, so thank you for that. The next question here says, what kind of outreach is the FAA doing? So let me take that. We'll answer your questions through today's event. This is a big portion of our outreach around this. We also plan future outreach to the balloon community in Albuquerque to share the letter of agreement with them. So we may do a subsequent event like this, and then both Tamara's team and Stephen's team, both there in Albuquerque, will be doing normal outreach and interaction with all of the folks in the ballooning community. So that is our plan moving forward. We want to be able to share and answer questions around this. Let's see. Boy, they're coming in fast and furious. Tamara, looks like maybe this one would fit for you, ma'am. It says, will it be safe if hot air balloons don't add tracking this year?
Well, by following the procedures and the conditions of the LOA, we'll be able to have balloon pilots and others use the airspace safely.
Okay, great. Thank you. And here's another question. Why didn't this issue come up? Why is it last minute? So let me take that one. So a little bit of timing relates to, I talked early on when we started the process this afternoon about the implementation of ADSB out was really a 10-year process from 2010 to 2020. And then we continued to operate in Albuquerque like we had before. And we've heard your recent questions and the FAA convened meetings with the relevant offices within the agency. During our review, we determined some of the language that we'd used in previous outreach materials was not clear. And we understand the confusion about applicability to hot air balloons in certain airspace classifications. The letter of agreement that we're discussing today is the legal mechanism that allows deviations from the rule that are approved in our regulations. And now here's another question that sort of relates to that. So let me just continue. It says, what is the long-term solution? So the FAA will use our safety process to determine next steps, and we will include industry stakeholders. We plan to include stakeholders in the process, which will allow data and operational information specific to balloon operations to be shared with the FAA. This work will allow the FAA to determine next steps. All right, let's look here. They continue to come in. So folks, thank you for you're sending your questions. Please continue to do that via the Google form on the platform that you're on. Stephen, looks like this one might fit for you. It's a two-part question, so let me read it to you. It says, what if I just want to fly my balloon? Can't I just call the tower?
So if you're not party to the agreement, you're going to be required to comply with the applicable regulations as they're published right now. And you're going to need to seek the relief through the procedures contained within the agreement of CFR Part 91, 225, and 215. The letter of agreement allows us to streamline and understand and have a situational awareness of where you're at, of where the balloonists are operating and how they're operating. Our ability to accommodate requests for non-signatory parties is going to be based on a number of factors, including workload, complexity, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate that. Tamara, this one looks like it might land in your world. We talked about it a little bit during the presentation, but the viewer is asking, which regulations are the balloon operators authorized to deviate from under the letter of agreement?
Okay, that's 4 regulations, 91.130 C and D, operations in Class C airspace communications and equipment, and 91.215 B and C, ATC transponder altitude reporting equipment and use. And the last one would be 91.225 B and D, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast ADSB out equipment and use.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Tamara, here's a related question that looks like it might fit for your team. What does the letter of agreement issuance mean for the International Balloon Fiesta in October?
The letter of LOA has no bearing for Fiesta. The Albuquerque FSDO issues the waiver for Fiesta every year, and we work with air traffic and we waive regulations. So 91.225 has been waived last year and will be waived continuously.
Great. So what I'm hearing you say is the October event, the International Balloon Fiesta, will continue to run the same way as it has in the past, right?
Yes, sir. Always the same way in the past.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Let's see. Tamara, looks like I've got one more here that looks like, well, you've got the hot mic. This person is asking, it says, I fly in other locations around the country. What does this letter of agreement mean for my other operations?
It has no bearing on your other operations. It only applies to Albuquerque Class C airspace.
Okay, and they ask, they mentioned there, they reference a letter of agreement in Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs will be developing their own LOA based on the one here in Albuquerque. They should have it shortly, I would think.
Okay, great, thanks. And I believe that that the agency, we are going to evaluate each case-by-case basis if there's other areas around the country, and we would that have significant balloon operations, and where appropriate, would initiate a letter of agreement process. And I think it's probably a good time to tell our viewers and folks attending today, if you are aware of other locations with similar controlled airspace and operations, please share those with us, and we'll be happy to work to make sure that we get operating procedures set up for folks in those various areas. Okay, boy, the questions just keep coming in, so y'all just stand by. We're gonna continue to sort through them here. Now here, I'm gonna let you all fight over this one. We have a viewer that says, "I was told we have to be a part of the Quad A Association to be eligible for the LOA. Is this accurate, or are there other options to be eligible?" Stephen, you want to take a shot at that?
I will. There's no requirement to be a member of an association or part of a company. We are handling individual requests for signatory parties for individuals. So you can sign on your own. We just require the information, your name, your certificate number, and your balloon N number.
Right. And Stephen, I think what I heard you describe earlier is the option is there for, like you just said, the individual balloon operator, the large associations or societies, or the commercial operators, and being able to do the letter of agreement with a larger association like Quad A allows for them to help us coordinate and communicate that message for all of their members versus having those hundreds of members all having to have an individual LOA, correct?
Correct. And, our preference would be to fall under the umbrella of a association. Like you said, it's easier to make changes to the LOA as far as the association is concerned about adding or editing member details. But we are entering into letters of agreement with individual operators as well.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. So Tamara, maybe this one might fit for you. Our viewer says, how will the FAA know which individual pilots have read, understood, and agreed to the letter?
Well, we keep a list. So we know who has LOAs and who doesn't. So between Stephen's group and my group, we keep that list updated. And if we have questions, we just communicate.
Right. And this is partly, I think, Tamara, where our balloon operators, like all operators within the National Airspace System, we count on you to be our partners in this regard as operators. And we count on you engaging. And if you're going to fly in this Class C airspace, be a part of the letter of agreement through any of the options that Stephen just described, and then adhere to that when you fly. And then if by chance someone is outside of that, then we would likely have an opportunity to have a conversation with them as a follow-on and help to educate and make sure that we stay safe in the NAS. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, sir. And my team is going to be out. They're going to be out talking to people and educating them on the LOA. So like I've told many people, if you see us, don't run. We're just out there to educate and to have a nice morning.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tamara. I appreciate that. Stephen, this one might fit for you. Our viewer says, why are you implementing a red zone at 8,000 feet MSL south of I-40 and west of I-25 that's in line with the approach to runway 8? I think that was in one of your depictions earlier that is attached to the letter of agreement, right?
Yeah. So if we're talking about the area that is just west of State 25, did I hear you correctly?
Yes, they said, sorry, my screen jumped, south of I-40 and west of I-25.
Yeah, so when we did traffic analysis, because one of the things we first got on right away was conducting a traffic analysis and really understanding where our traffic flows were. The data that we analyzed revealed that that area contained a high volume of arrival and departure traffic in that critical phase of flight. And by that, I mean not only less than 10,000 feet, but we're talking about less than 3,000 feet as they make their arrival into runway 8. And that is just an area that we kind of need to be sterilized in that area. Now we understand that, you know, that area was popular for balloonists, and that's why we kind of made the exemption area just to the west of that, along the river and to points west at or below 6,000. Because we know that the balloonists like to fly in that downtown area along the Rio Grande.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. Now, another letter of agreement question here, Stephen. It says the draft LOA addresses landing at ABQ, but what about landing at Kirtland?
So landing in Kirtland, that was kind of the one of the last slides that I showed. Landing in Kirtland is not necessarily our purview as air traffic. That's more of Kirtland Air Force Base's responsibility. So I would put the balloonists in contact with those entities over at Kirtland. Kirtland did ask us to put a couple of blurbs in there that, hey, if you have to land, only do it in an emergency situation. If you do land, make sure that you stay with the balloon until security, base security arrives.
Okay, great. And I think this may be related. It looks like it was a follow-on question from the same person, Stephen. It says some smaller balloons may not be able to go to 8,000 feet in the summer. What then?
Well, with anything, and one of the slides contained the blurb that, you know, if you're not able to comply with the deviation area or the contents of the letter of agreement, contact air traffic control. Contact us on 120.3. We understand that things happen. We understand that balloonists have limited control as far as their navigation is concerned at times. Contact us. Let us know what you need, and we will assist you, and we can get things moved around.
Okay, great. So here's another one that comes in, and Tamara, I'm sorry, these all kind of seem to be landing in Stephen's world operational. This one has to do with applicability. Now, the viewer asked, the letter of agreement asks that 10 or more balloons have a lead balloon and file to what amounts to be a flight plan. A flight plan asks for information typical for a fixed wing group of aircraft that can predict a flight path. Balloons can't always predict an exact flight path due to real-time changing winds, which we understand. Will this particular point be amended to make it feasible for lighter than air aircraft to comply? So Stephen, talk to us a little bit about the applicability piece and maybe how it's not really about a flight plan.
No, that's not intended to be a flight plan at all. So, you know, when we were having our discussions about what do we think is a factor as far as groups of balloons are concerned, we kind of landed on that number 10. And what we're asking is essentially, give us a call ahead of time. Give us an idea of where you're going. What's your float direction? What altitude do you expect to operate? Which direction do you expect to head, right? As far as the communication piece, we want to designate a lead balloon. That way we're only having to communicate with one balloon as opposed to 10 balloons. Frequency congestion is a concern of ours over at air traffic. We have limited time on the frequency, and we have a whole other traffic situation that we need to sort out. We don't necessarily need check-ins from 10 balloons when one can speak for the group.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I appreciate you explaining a little bit of that why in the background. We showed those pictures earlier, and I appreciate you doing that. And that helps, I think, everybody get a little bit bigger picture of how we're working to integrate and safely operate the mix of aircraft and vehicles in your airspace between lighter than air, fixed wing, and all the other entities that you're mixing there in the national airspace system. So thank you for that. Here's another question. It says, are we to initiate communication with the tower if we are crossing south of I-40, but west of the Rio Grande, or simply monitor 120.3?
Our request is that if you're within 5 nautical miles of the Sunport, contact us on 120.3. A simple check-in with your call sign and your position will satisfy that requirement. That way, if we do have a situation, we know who you are and we can hail you rather quickly.
Stephen, I believe in the letter of agreement with the diagrams that you showed and some of the explanations that are in the actual letter, those differences are spelled out. So when folks begin to sign on to the letter of agreement, they will see the places that they need to check in versus monitor, correct?
Absolutely. And if there's any question by any ballooning individual, community association, etc., please feel free to give us a call. We are here ready to clarify any concern or question you may have.
Okay, great. So folks, thank you for the questions. We're still have got a bunch to go through and they're still coming in, but please don't forget you can enter questions into the Google form on your platform. We want to make sure that you don't go away wondering something today. We're here to answer those questions. And here's another one. It says, what IN number should a pilot enter if they don't own a balloon or fly in multiple balloons? This would possibly be through an association. So Tamara or Stephen, which one of you wants to jump on that?
I would propose sending us an email with your name, certificate number, and kind of describe your situation. In that instance, it might be beneficial to fall under the umbrella of somebody like a Quad A or an association. That way we can get your approval. That way you can operate within the Class Charlie airspace.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now here's another question that says and I think you may have touched on this a minute ago, Stephen, but let's just double check. This question says, what defines a quote group of balloons? Just need to confirm the group of 10 or more is in regard to ride operators, not fun flyers with a question mark.
We're considering the group of prior notification and the lead balloon designation as 10 or more. And this could be, if you intend to fly as a group of 10 individuals, we would consider that a group. Now, let's say two separate parties show up as groups of 5. We're not considering that necessarily a group of 10. 10 is the kind of trigger number for coordination and lead balloon designation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Tamara, this one might fit for you. This one is about student pilots. This says, should student pilots consider signing on to the letter of agreement prior to training so they can train with an instructor in the letter of agreement areas?
You know, I'd have to defer to Stephen on that. I would think if you want an LOA and you want to operate in Class Charlie airspace, then you need to apply for one. But Stephen, what do you think?
I would propose yes. If you're a student balloonist, I would propose signing either under maybe your instructor's letter of agreement or within a party like Quad A or some other association. That way your name is kind of on our records and we know that you have familiarity with the letter of agreement. You know the areas that we want you to operate in. We know that you know the monitoring and communications requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Appreciate that. Here's another question that just came in. Can individual private pilots be, quote, operators, or is it only for commercial operations?
No, individuals can be considered operators.
Okay, great. And I think we talked about that a little bit earlier in the various categories that can sign on, right? Here's another, I think we just answered it, but this is another student pilot question. Stephen, back to your answer. They're asked about, can student pilots consider signing letter of agreement? We addressed that, but here's the part that's different. Is there a way to do so? So what would be the path for a student pilot to do what you just described to sign on? If you don't mind just covering that again, what you did.
Absolutely. So probably the easiest way is to fall under an instructor's LOA, because if they're operating in Class Charlie airspace, they're going to have an LOA. Another avenue, like I said earlier, is an association, maybe Quad A, fall under their letter of agreement. You can contact us directly and we can work out something on an individual basis if that's what you're interested in. It makes it easier for you.
Stephen, this one, while you got your mic turned on, this person says, I came on late and I need to know how to sign a letter of agreement.
So the process that we're currently doing at the facility is we either receive a phone call. We have been doing customer outreach of our own accord here, but contact us. What we'll do is we'll send you a draft letter of agreement to kind of review, and then we'll have a conversation with you, make sure that you understand the contents of the letter of agreement, i.e. the operating areas, the monitoring and communication requirements. Once that's done, you provide us your pilot's name, airman certificate number, balloon N number. If you're going to have anybody operating under your letter of agreement, we need in writing their request to operate under that letter of agreement, as well as an attestation that they are knowledgeable of and will adhere to the contents of that letter of agreement. Once we receive all that, we will negotiate an effective date. We will send you a tailored letter of agreement with an effective date on it. You will sign that, send it back to us. I will then sign it. You will get a copy of that signed letter of agreement, and we will place that in our repository here. That letter of agreement will be effective until March 31st of 2023, at which time everyone's letter of agreement will expire, as we hope to have a permanent national solution at that time.
Okay, great. And here's a related question that just came in. So you talked about when they expire in March of 2023. This question says, well, when does it start? When does it go into effect?
The effective date is what we negotiate on. We need to receive all the required documents and materials from the operator. Once that's done, you will receive a phone call or a communication from us, maybe via email. We talk about when do you want to start? What day do you want your effective date to be? Once your date's effective and the letter of agreement is signed by both yourself and myself, the agreement's in effect.
Great, thank you. So if I'm hearing correctly, Stephen, no matter if we sign it next week or a month from now, that's the start date, and they all end at the end of March in 2023, correct?
Correct. Correct. If your effective date was today, your termination date is March 31st of 2023. If you sign it in October, your termination date is March 31st of 2023. They're all going to expire on the same day.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I know you just covered a minute ago the process that goes back and forth between, when they reach us and how you get to the point of signing the letter of agreement. Here's a related question that says, are there instructions out there somewhere to fill out the letter of agreement, or where would we find those?
We would send those to you when we send the draft letter of agreement. The process is rather simple. We send you the draft letter of agreement. It's reviewed. We like to send it ahead of time. That way the operator has a chance to review it and formulate their questions rather than doing that on the phone or real time. Once you're satisfied that you can adhere to the contents of the letter of agreement, call us back, provide those. And like I said, it's simple information. It's the operator's name, certificate number, balloon end number. Once we have those items, we will negotiate the effective date and we'll get it signed. We have had no delay on turning these letters of agreement around so far.
Okay, great. Here's another question. It has to do with corporate operations. It says, if you fly corporate aircraft, do all the pilots that fly that aircraft need to be listed? Can an individual list multiple aircraft?
For corporate or commercial flights, yes, each pilot needs to be listed underneath the letter of agreement. And for the second part of that question, yes, an individual can register multiple balloons.
Okay, and here's a related question that I'm not sure if this is you or Tamara. It says, if we are a commercial operation, not associated with the larger operation, but simply a single balloon, but commercial, can we still operate our commercial operation if we sign on with a larger organization such as Quad A or Top Gun?
Yes, if you fall under an umbrella of somebody else's letter of agreement, you can operate.
Okay, Tamara, anything from the flight standards perspective to add to that?
No, not really. We're glad they're back up and flying, and we look forward to more people requesting an LOA.
Okay, and Tamara, I know this one's for you. This viewer asked, do we need to keep a copy of the letter of agreement on board our balloon if we get ramp checked by the FAA?
Well, certainly it'll help. Like I said, we know who have LOAs, and it's updated daily. When my teams go out, they really don't look for that, but yes, it would be helpful to see that.
Okay, great, thank you. Now this question has to do with how do we communicate with you? If we have additional questions after this broadcast, who can we contact to reach out for a timely answer for our questions about the LOA via email? What are the specific web addresses that this video will be available on? Stephen, how do you want folks to reach out to you initially?
The email address listed in this presentation is a good email address to get a hold of us. You can contact us on the telephone as well. We are conducting outreach. Like I said, I've been in constant communication with Tamara over at the FSDO, trying to get names and numbers of known balloonists and known operators. That way we can get a jump start on this. Like I said, we are eager. We understand the importance of hot air ballooning to New Mexico, and we are highly supportive of it. We just want it to, we want the balloonists to operate in that safe and situationally aware environment.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask our team that's helping us with the slides to bring up the slide that has the email address on it, Stephen and Tamara, if that's okay. And we're going to display that for a little bit while we're talking, so folks will have a chance to copy that email address down. And Stephen, that's probably the best place to initiate that initial conversation with us, to send an email to this address. And then we'll follow up with sharing, like you said, the letter of agreement information. And there it is on the screen there. So it starts with the 9, and our apologies up front for the length of that. You may be wondering, why is that so complicated? It unfortunately is just one of those things that in the way that our IT system works, that we address how we create email addresses. So if you would, please copy that down. There it is, 9-AJO-AJT-ABQ-balloon@faa.gov. And that will come to the team, that you can start the conversation around the letter of agreement. Stephen, anything you want to add to that while we leave that up for a little bit?
I would just like to add, I do have a dedicated specialist that's monitoring that email address, and he has been very responsive to those requests that come into that email address. So it is regularly monitored. So you should receive a rather quick response. If you don't, please call the facility, and we will make sure to acknowledge your requests.
Okay, great. Now here's a couple questions that I'll take real quick. One says, will a copy of the slide deck be made available? And the other one says, where can we find the maps that you showed on this forum? So we will be making this slide deck available. The presentation will be on the FAA's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. It'll probably take us a couple days to get them there, but we will push those out. Those graphics that Stephen showed earlier during his presentation are embedded in that presentation, and they will be available there. Also of note, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those graphics are also part of the letter of agreement. So when folks enter into the letter of agreement with us, they have copies of those depictions there as well, correct?
That is correct. They are the 4 attachments at the end of the letter of agreement. So all signatory parties will receive copies of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Here's an operational question. It says, if climbing to 8,500 or above causes you to change direction, which we know happens in Albuquerque, that's why we have the Albuquerque box, right? It causes you to change direction to the point where it would force you to have to land in the red zone. When do you determine it to be classified as a, quote, emergency? Stephen, what do you think?
I would say as soon as you identify the fact that you need to land or operate in an area outside of the confines of the letter of agreement, go ahead and give us a call. More knowledge is better than less knowledge. If we know what you're doing, we can accommodate, and we may not be able to move you, but we can move traffic around you. And that's the whole point of communication. While I said frequency congestion is a concern of ours, absolutely, we want to know if you're in any kind of an urgent distress or situation where you cannot comply with the letter of agreement.
Okay, great. And the key there, I think, is what I'm hearing you say is communication, right? So let us know what your situation is. Let's talk about it and help us help you in that situation, so we can either avert or move other aircraft in operations, right?
Absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. More communication is better than no communication.
Okay, great. So folks, thank you for the questions. They're continuing to come in, but just a reminder, please send those in on the Google form on the platform that you're watching this on. We'd love to hear from you. And again, we don't want you to go home today or leave this venue with a question that you've not asked. So if something's not been clear, or we haven't covered something that's on your mind, please send us that question. We want to address that up front. Now, Stephen, I think we've covered this a little bit, but here's a question that just popped in. Where do we go to fill out our side of the letter of agreement, and how do we submit it to the FAA?
So again, we will send you that draft. Once we have determined that you're interested in the letter of agreement, we will send you that draft. to have you look over. Then we'll have a brief discussion to ensure that you understand the contents and the responsibilities of the letter of agreement. Once all that's done, you've sent us your information, we will send you that official tailored letter of agreement for you to sign. Once you return that, then I will sign it. The letter will then become effective at that time.
Okay, and again, that initial outreach is to that email address that we showed, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, here's another question. It says, I'm out of town, and what number do we call if we're out of town and going to be in Albuquerque to fly at the end of April or May? How do they enter into this agreement with you, Stephen?
You can reach out to us via the email listed earlier, or you can call the facility, get a hold of one of us. If you don't have that contact information, you can contact the FSDO. I'm sure Tamara will move that information to me immediately, and we will reach out to you to get that letter of agreement to you.
And I think probably, I don't want to surmise here, but if you know you're going to come at the end of April or May, I'd encourage you to reach out now early. Send us that email. That's probably the easiest way without having to chase around looking for a phone number. Send us that email now and let's start the conversation, right?
Absolutely. Sooner's better than later, and we can always push the effective date out if that's necessary. We're looking to accommodate the ballooning community as best we can. Okay,
great. Now here's a question that maybe we weren't completely clear on. So let's look at this question here. It says, I'm still confused about what an organized group is. It's not unusual for 10 or more balloons to show up at a launch site, say Balloon Fiesta Park, but not organized as a group. They take off from one site, but they're not coordinated. Should I assume this is not considered a group? And then here's a follow-on. Is there any additional information I need to take if that occurs?
We only consider it a group if you intend to fly as a group. So 10 balloonists showing up at Balloon Fiesta Park to launch independently, we do not consider a group. We only consider a group of 10 or more balloons under the same association, under the same company, or maybe 10 balloonists called each other and planned to go up as a group of 10. And the reason why we do that is because we would like you to designate that lead flight balloon if you are all in the same group of balloons. That way it kind of reduces our frequency congestion.
Okay, great. Tamara, on a kind of a related question, will the FAA officials that come to talk to us at the launch or landing site have the same understanding for what is a group of balloons or not?
Yes, sir. They will understand. They've been briefed on the LOA and its procedures and conditions. They've attended a briefing like this. So they have all the information and they're ready to talk to you about it and educate you about it. And if you have any questions, you can always call the FSDO and I can help, getting you in touch with Stephen. And if you need help with an LOA, contact the FSDO. We'll help you.
Okay, great. And we have time for one last question. Stephen, looks like this one might land in your realm of experience. It says, how long from the signing of a letter of agreement will it take for it to go into effect?
As soon as I get a signed letter of agreement back, it's almost instantaneously. If we have negotiated a date and it has been signed by the operator, as soon as I sign it, it's in effect. I do provide the FSDO notification daily and, almost instantaneously. I usually fire those emails right off.
Great. And again, it's not going to be a surprise to anybody. As we work with you to complete that letter of agreement, we will come to an agreement with you on when does this go into effect. So it can be as quickly or whatever you need. That's where it'd be really important and vital in our communication with you for us to let us know what you need, and the date of effectiveness is all part of that. And again, remember, those are in effect once they go into effect until March 31st of 2023. And they will go into effect at the date that we agree upon. So, well, you know what? We have flown through our time, and folks, thank you so much for attending today. We are so honored to have you here. Stephen and Tamara, thank you for joining us and helping us to answer the questions and cover the folks that have joined us here today across all these multiple platforms. I really do appreciate you being there. And for those of you attending, thank you for joining us today. Our goal was to start a conversation with you to discuss the letter of agreement and explain how it will affect air traffic operations in the Albuquerque area. I hope that we've succeeded. We are committed to keep you updated on our work as we move forward toward a long-term solution. Don't forget, today's event has been recorded and will be available on the FAA's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. We plan to stay in touch, and remember, if you have questions or comments, you can reach out to the Albuquerque Air Traffic Control or the Flight Standards District Office. Thank you for joining us today, and let's work together to keep our airspace safe, but usable for all. Have a great day and have a great weekend. Thank you.